like a traditional wine spritz going on. It's a lot better.
Yep.
And it's much easier than sangria because it's not a sangria because sangria has other stuff on it. It's way easy. And also at home, you know, when you might open a bottle of wine and for whatever reason you don't end up drinking it, you can just reuse it that way.
Yeah. Spaniards, is it just red wine or do you have the same thing with white wine?
It's funny because we traditionally only had it with red wine. Although I think that because of the alcohol situation and the younger generations coming in, there's more and more people drinking white wine with ice. I wouldn't say that kind of the white soda, just white wine with ice or rosé wine with ice. Which, you know.
Sure. If you want to. So, so your grandfather sets up the winery in 1960. They're operating bulk wine. He sells it in when he passed away, or the family sold it.
They sold it when he passed away, and I think it was like in the late 70s, 1977, 78 approx.
And the vines that you farm now, those were all that passed down from your grandfather to your father and family.
Yeah.
And so you owned those. That was being sold for bulk. Somebody else was farming it. Somebody else was managing it. I imagine that's very common in Castilla.
Oh yeah.
Most farming is contractual, and farming companies that come in for families that have some say. Or
now, you mean now these days, or?
Then and now, just trying to understand.
I mean, then it was more like it was either the big estates owned by family, old traditional, more richer families, and then or smaller kind of growers. And what has happened is that all those big families, they don't exist any longer because there's a few of them and they have kept the extension, but most of them have sold by pieces, by little plots of land. So now it's a whole bunch of smaller growers that have smaller plots of land.
Yeah.
That most of them sell whatever they have to co-ops, whether it's olives, whether it's grapes, or whether it's almonds, or
yeah, they're not processing anything.
No. Most of the people don't process; they sell.
So, before we get to your father and your move, tell us about situate us in Castilla-La Mancha, because I think one of the things that we need to do better consistently, and we've always talked about it, is distinguishing you from the largest wine producing region in Spain, which is Castilla-La Mancha. So just give us an overview of the region and how big it is and how many bottles and all the rest.
Just so you have an idea, I don't know if they all physically know where, like in the map.
Tell us.
Do you want me to show it on the computer or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because I do have a little picture here, and I think it's quite.
So this is something we always talk about, which is anchoring. Just make sure you know where you are first.
So this is like the map of Spain. If you see that, all of these little red dots or yellow dots or whatever, they're different appellations in Spain. So Spain has, it's quite extensive appellation classification, and so there's wine made all over Spain. But that big spot there, the big red spot, is basically 5 provinces in Spain, under the province of under the autonomous region of Castilla-La Mancha. So this area is Castilla-La Mancha, and all of this area on the north, where this is Castilla y León. There's 2 Castillas because Spain was divided in 2 Castillas.
What is Castilla?
Castilla comes way.
Castle, right?
Yeah, but it comes way from the back in the 1400s, where the Catholic kings were the ones who owned the 2 Castillas, and it comes traditionally from how Spain was built.
Got it.
So it's
But quite literally a center of power.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah, I get
Castilla
it.
of La Mancha, the Castilla of Leon, and then those.
there was the reign of Castilla and the reign of Leon and the reign of Aragon, and then by different marriages, whatever, they ended up all having them together. So this is the biggest grape growing. Castilla-La Mancha is the biggest grape growing region in the world, and we grow I think there's like almost 600,000 hectares. There's more wine produced there than in all of Australia, just so you have an idea.
Wow.
And obviously, with such an extension, it's basically impossible to process everything bottled. You know, there's no way. And especially because of the situation, there's smaller growers that do not process because they don't have the capacity, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have, so they end up selling, you know, to the co-ops. And the cooperative system, if you think about it, it's a very, I would say, very nice way for, you know, the smaller producers to get together and have somewhere where to take your piece of, you know, land, production, whatever you're doing. The problem is that most of those co-ops are today run by people that I would say are not qualified enough to understand that it's not only bulk wine that they should sell, but it's also, you know, wine with a brand, and it's kind of complex for them to understand because they don't have the education, they don't have the training to think that way. And so what they end up doing is a lot of bulk wine. And I would say that today there's very good wine, you know, made in bulk. You have to take into account that the co-op in my town makes 45 million liters.
Wow.
That's a lot. And in order to make good wine with 45 million liters, you also have to do things good and right. But unfortunately, the problem is that a lot of that bulk wine ends up being sold to bigger corporations inside Spain and outside of Spain for different reasons. And so there's no name after that. And my region has that, I would say, still has a little bit of that connotation of, you know, bulk wine, whatever. Although, obviously, in such a big place, there's always other people. Not everybody's the same. And there's smaller wineries like us that are doing things very differently, and that, you know, we are making sure that we keep the vineyards as they were from our, you know, parents, grandparents. You know, we focus on organic, we focus on keeping the old bush vines. There's a lot of those things happening, and it's not like massive production. So, you know, there's this two situations, and I think that it's just a question of explaining to everybody that this little map, wines are not only made in the same way, that there's different wineries that are doing things differently. And I would say that these days there's even more, because there's more and more smaller operations that have been coming out and getting out of that co-op system because they are starting to process wines differently.
So if you are a buyer like Jim Boob on our side, who is a master somm who buys from multiple restaurants, or you're a buyer at Whole Foods, a senior buyer, somebody who's seen a lot of volume wine, you have probably been presented with 100 bottles of Castilla-La Mancha that is very low price. How do you, in addition to what you're explaining here, how do we approach that buyer in a way that gets them to listen to us from the start about quality, as opposed to just giving you the first thing? My concern is the first note of Castilla-La Mancha, and I think in some ways we've failed you where people sort of say, well, it's Castilla, right? But it's not. It's something else. How do you think about that? Because I'm sure you've met a lot of buyers who have that mindset.
I try not to say we're from Castilla-La Mancha. I say we're from Toledo because it's true. I mean, and it's funny because Castilla-La Mancha is made of 5 different provinces: Toledo, Guadalajara, Ciudad Real, Cuenca. But the only really known province in Castilla-La Mancha outside of Spain is Toledo. And it's not Toledo, Ohio, it's Toledo. And Toledo used to be the capital of Spain in the 1400s. A lot of the people that come to Spain and visit Spain, they associate Toledo, a very ancient medieval city, with quality, with a different image. And they may not associate it as a wine producing area, but when you tell them that it's that way, then it's a different story. And then again, I also think that in my case, obviously the appellation doesn't do much for me. And I think that the way we need to present the winery is not focusing that much on the appellation. I would just say center of Spain, where there's, you know, different things happening. I would just highlight other positive aspects of our winery that are not necessarily the appellation. And in fact, right now we're in a situation where I'm going to have to take a decision on whether to continue with the IGP Castilla or not. Because when we could do, right now as where we are located, I could have the DO, the DO La Mancha, which I don't want to for the reasons that I'm saying, or the other alternative was IGP Castilla. The reason why most of the wineries like mine decided to go in IGP Castilla is because we didn't want to be associated to the DO La Mancha, because that meant, like you said, it's more associated to like bulk wine. But right now, the people that are ruling and, you know, taking care of all these paperwork that we have to fill out, they want us to like put this logo, this horrible logo of Tierra de Castilla in the front labels, and we don't want to do that. And so the first thing I thought is, okay, you know, what am I going to do? What am I going to get out of this?
What is the Spain? What is the Vino de Tavolo?
No, it's not. It would not be Vino de Mesa. It would have to be the next category, like down. I mean, down if you want to. It's like what we call varietal wine. So you could use the grape, you can use the vintage. The only thing is that you just have to get rid of the Vino de la Tierra de Castilla name on the back label. That's it.
Which is fine for you, right?
For me, it's fine.
Yeah.
The other alternative, which I'm also considering, is to have my own appellation, to go scale up, you know, like a DO, like a Pago, which I don't really know if that is a plus. I mean, it is a plus for me in Spain, definitely, but outside of Spain, I don't know if people really understand what that means.
Tell us about the process of setting that up.
It's paperwork. It's paperwork. Paperwork.
Would that be years to set up?
Well, I just saw the other day on an article that there's a winery, which I know, who started the operation, you know, making wine from scratch, buying vineyards or whatever. I think it was in 2003, and they filed for their own DO in 23, and they got it just recently. So, I think if you do things right, it shouldn't take that long.
And so it would be...
Because it's a question of defining. You have to define why you are different. So because it's a DO, it's a special DO. So you have to tell the EU, listen, I am different because the climate conditions where I'm located are this, because my soil is this way, because my grapes are Centibel, they are this age, they have this pH, they have this acidity, so all those specific conditions because of the history, because it's what makes me different from the neighbor.
So give us the thumbnail sketch. What is the justification for that, one by one? What are the things that would set apart, that would say to somebody, yes, that makes sense, you are different?
I mean, for me, is one is like the altitude where we are. That is something, you know, it's not everybody is up at 750 meters above sea level, and that impacts the climate completely.
How much of Castilla is lower than 700?
There's, I mean, anywhere in Castilla is, I mean, they go from 600, not only in Castilla, but in Spain, because we're not talking about comparing Castilla with Castilla. We're talking about comparing being unique in general. And, you know, there's a lot of land that isn't at 750 meters above sea level. Two is the fact that we are preserving the kind of Centibel that we do have at the property, the kind of Tempranillo that not everybody has that genetics. So that is important. And then obviously soils, the different kinds of soils. I think that you know is enriching because we have different kinds of soils. In my where we actually have the winery is an area where it used to be a base of a river. So not everybody has the vineyards located around that kind of, you know, and then obviously having worked organic for many years, I have seen the results of that in terms of the rich biodiversity that we have at the vineyards, which is helping combat, you know, the climate situations that we have these days, the ups and downs.
Can you put biodiversity into the DO claim?
I think, you know, I'm not sure that's something that I need to investigate, but I think that you could easily.
Yeah. Thumbnail again, what are the soils?
We have three different kinds of soils, either 100% clay, clay with limestone, or sandy soils. Natur, for instance, is on a sandy soil vineyard. Colección and 200 Cepas are more clay, and part of the Colección is clay with limestone, and so is the Garnacha.
We'll have you re-mention as we go through the wines, but just to set up that piece. So, elevation soils, farming,
The wind is another thing that for me is key in terms of how that, because that's part of the climate too, obviously, you know, it's part of your climate and unique conditions.
Why do you have wind?
That is a good question. I think it's because of the elevation and because of where we're actually located. But that's an interesting point that maybe I should investigate a bit more, you know, in terms of like, you know, finding why and which different winds impact, because I think that is really interesting in terms of how it affects the sanity of the vineyards, for sure.
And then tell us, I want to separately talk about Sensibel versus Tempranillo and that, but you talked about